Hi, welcome to the Elle Russ Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at elleruss.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Today, my guest is Patricia Stark, and she's the author of Calmfidence: How to Trust Yourself, Tame Your Inner Critic, and Shine in Any Spotlight. She works on both sides of the camera and stage as a media trainer, public speaking trainer, certified body language specialist, and confidence coach. And that's exactly what she does. She coaches people in any profession whose careers and goals rely on their ability to communicate and helps them do it with calm and confidence. Visit patriciastark.com and enjoy the show. Hi, Patricia. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me today.
I love the title of your book, Calmfidence. And this is such a, wow, those two things go well together. But before we get into the principles of your book, let's talk about how you even arrived here as something that you do teach and help people with. We covered in your intro what you do for a living, and we'll get more into those details. But where did this brew in your world where you were like, you know what, I've got something to say about this?
Yeah, so working in front of the camera and as a public speaker for decades, I organically and unexpectedly started to become a coach and trainer. One day I was on a job at KPMG in New Jersey, and I was hired as someone who was going to be moderating and interviewing for a video production for them. And the executives were, many of them, very nervous about being in front of the camera. Some of them had to read teleprompters. Some of them had to go through some of the questioning, and it was not going well. And I selfishly didn't want to be there till midnight, so I started coaching them through some of their issues, as far as finding the words, knowing how to read the prompter without getting nervous and sounding like they were reading, collecting their thoughts, working through some of the interview questions, and just really trying to be as helpful as I could so that it would go smooth for everyone. And about a week later, they called me back and said, "Hey, we love you coming in as a moderator and as a host and a spokesperson for some of the video productions, but that training worked really well for us. Would you ever come in just to do that?" So it was that light bulb moment of, wow, like this is something that I can do to help people and perhaps expand my business offerings, and hung my shingle, and the rest is history. And through the coaching and training of people, whether it was for public speaking or for being in front of the camera, it dawned on me that what everyone was really seeking was, in addition to being confident and feeling confident, they were still getting anxiety. They were still stressing out. They were still having those nerves and that out of body experience, and some of those physiological things that happen when we are faced with anxiety and feeling out of our comfort zone. And I realized that this was something that everyone wants, and it was all my clients and students had in common. Who doesn't want to be more confident and find their calm at the same time?
Absolutely. Now you've been a performer for a while in front of the camera. You've been on television. You're also a fellow SAG-AFTRA performer. So you have a lot of experience with this. Before you got to the point where you were able to actually coach these people in the room, did you ever struggle with it? And what did you do as you started to go upon a career that was public, where you'd have to speak? I mean, look, you choose a career, you're like, all right, so now I'm in it. I got to do it. What were your early beginnings with confidence in public speaking?
Yes, well, I think that most people are surprised when they hear me say this, because I have come a long way. I was terrified. It
Mhm.
was disabling. I can remember not wanting to walk up to the lunchroom line by myself because I didn't want to feel like I was in the spotlight. I would raise my hand in class, and sometimes wouldn't even raise my hand in class because I could feel the sweat dripping down the sides of my body. And I loved the idea of reading out loud. I loved the idea of all of those things, but literally couldn't bring myself to do it without terrible fear and physical reaction. And I went through all of my my middle school and my high school like this. And then I went to college, and I didn't realize, I went in as a business major, that I was going to have to give a speech. And it was an introduction to business class, and our assignment was to get up there in front of the podium and in front of the class and give a presentation. And I was assigned something that I didn't even know about. It was the stock market market, and
Oh
you
my
had
God,
to,
I'd be
right.
lost.
Yeah, me too. So, it's one thing to get up and speak about something that is your passion or that's near and dear to your heart or that you're an advocate for. But when someone assigns you something that you really know nothing about and feel really clueless about, which unfortunately happens in business a lot, we don't truly have maybe the passion for it or the depth in the topic, and then we're thrown up there in front of a room, it can really just be a recipe for disaster. And I remember dying 1,000 deaths that entire class, watching other people get up there, and it just kept brewing and kept being worse. And I thanked the Lord that there was a podium there, because literally my legs were shaking so bad that I was hiding behind the podium. And my father had told me a story about the term the bulls and the bears, and it was that when a bull fights, they hit up with their horns, and when the bear fights, they swat down with their paws. So thus the up and down market. So that was an interesting little tidbit that I worked into this awful, awful speech that I was giving.
It's like the only thing that you had to say about
That's right. And as I sat back down in my seat, feeling really horrible about myself, the teacher, who was a tough cookie, she would, choose that person that would chew the inside of her mouth and look you up and down like she was going to chew you up and spit you out, comes running up to me at the end of class and says, "I just have to tell you, I never knew the origin of that. And that was such a great story. And I learned something today. Thank you." So I think after I pulled my jaw up from the floor and, was getting over the fact that I thought she was coming to tell me I just failed, and she came with this rave review, was a huge lesson for me that day. I suddenly realized that if you give something of value, if you be of service, if you can put your teacher's hat on, that, it doesn't have to be about you. It can take an enormous amount of pressure off you feeling like you have to look perfect, sound perfect, have every duck in a row. So I enrolled in a public speaking class, and fortunately I had this wonderful woman who was just full of life, and it was really more of a life skills class about believing in yourself and what's the story that you're telling yourself inside before you go speaking on the outside. And that made a world of difference for me. It was still tough, it was still hard, but I loved the idea of being in front of a group, and I loved human beings. I loved being able to want to be a communicator and connect with people. So it was super important to me to somehow find a way to get over that. And it was a long process, and it wasn't easy, and it took time. But by throwing myself into an industry where I was going to be in front of a camera, or reporting, or communicating in some fashion, it literally was about feeling the fear and doing it anyway.
Absolutely. And I've talked about this before, but I remember back in the days before I did my first sketch comedy show, like 20 years ago, I thought, oh no, I'm cursed, because right before every show, I'd have to run to the bathroom, shit my brains out.
Yeah.
It was like a whole thing. We called them the pre-show shits. We just, that's what we called them. And people would say, like, oh, no, this will go away. And I remember being like, oh no, am I ever going to be able to pursue my dream? Because I can't afford to have this anxiety ridden bathroom meltdown before, and it did, it totally went away. But it was actually for the first couple of shows. Yeah. I think I need a mirror. So I would say to everyone out there, give yourself time before also you're speaking for the first time. You may actually have a physiological thing that happens a little bit on the first couple ones. And then we got over it. And then as time went by, a newbie would come in and they'd be like, before a show, and they'd be like grabbing their stomach and be like, uh-oh, you've got yep. Don't worry, this is what's happening right now. So it takes some time, and it can be scary at first because you feel it's like kind of can be a violent physical reaction, at least in that situation for me it was. And I thought, I'm doomed. I have this thing that I love. So I think we're both here to say to everyone, you can do this. It is uncomfortable at first. It's never fun. And then it becomes so comfortable, it's not even a second thought. And that's the whole point of Calmfidence, right? So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all,
could I add something before you move on to the next? I'm
sorry,
please. You made me think of a quick story that I want to just add in here. Yeah. And I can't say names because, I sign agreements where I don't give away let the cat out of the bag here. But I had one client, very, very famous for working in front of the camera. What a wonderful approachable personality, extremely good at what he did, but always until that time, everything was videotaped. Everything was taped, so it was a safer space. He wasn't live. And then he got asked to host a national competition show, which also shall remain nameless because I don't want anybody guessing here. And literally was vomiting backstage before he was going out live in front of the world that already loved him and knew him, but because he had not been in that situation and he was out of his comfort zone and doing something for the first time that he had never done before, voila, it was coming out the other direction, but same kind of reaction you were just talking about.
Well, that's a great example because you're talking about someone who's already out there, interviewed on camera. It's just that it was a live versus pre-taped, which is a totally different ballgame. I mean, let's talk a little bit about, God, there's so many ways to go here. So let me just talk a little bit about, I firmly believe, and I know you do, that anybody can attain confidence, right? I always say that it's the sum of the thoughts you think and the actions you take. This is practice, could be coaching, could be some therapy, but that it's really attainable for everybody. And it's extremely important. And especially in this day and age, in the arena of social media and websites, people don't have a choice now. Like if you're a real estate agent, you can't just put up the billboard. You also have to be doing, getting in front of camera. So now more than ever, this has become such a skill that is very important to promoting oneself.
Yes, I have 2 real estate clients right now as we speak that I'm working with on a weekly basis to get them to a place of feeling calm and confident doing their own videos for social media and for their web and newsletters and things like that. And you're right, now more than ever, you have to be in front of the camera. You have to be out there and be able to communicate and put yourself in the spotlight in more ways than we ever have in the past. And I think the thing that really freaks people out is they just put such a high price on this whole lights, camera, action. It's showbiz, it's showtime, all these other things. And while, yes, it's great to have that kind of energy, I think to put it in perspective and say, you know what, this is just another way to connect on a human level, one-on-one, with someone that we can't be with in person. We almost have to really kind of knock it down a couple of notches and make it be a little less of a price on what we're putting on these things, because when we think that it's such a big deal from everything that we've ever seen or witnessed before, and when we try to compete with that, it can be overwhelming, especially for people that have not had to be performers or be in the spotlight before. So that's the one thing that I'll work with really in the beginning, is kind of laying that foundation of, okay, let's find out how high of a price are you putting on this, and the fact that you think everything has to look so perfect and look like your favorite TV host or whatever, that's an enormous amount of pressure. And I'll tell them, look, I've had the luxury of working with people over their careers and seeing that, in the beginning, they kind of sucked. They were nowhere near as good as they are.
100%. Hey, George Clooney. George Clooney is a perfect example of that. Let's just talk about George Clooney. And he's good now, but the guy did like 30 or 20, 30 pilots before he ever even got the medical show. What was it? Gosh, not General Hospital.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yes,
my gosh,
ER.
I'm blanking on it now. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, until he got ER. So all of those pilots, no one ever saw those episodes, or maybe they ran once and got canceled. And if you look back at some of his old work, you're kind of like, all right, he's kind of a cheesy newbie actor. There's nothing special here. But look at where he is now. I mean,
oh, wait, he was a goofy boyfriend on Facts of Life.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, boy, that just aged us. But yeah, no, for sure.
No, I'm talking about the repeats.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So no, that's a great example too. Again, understanding that this can take time and you can get good at it.
Absolutely. And anyone can. And when I speak at high schools and middle schools in particular, I really like to tell younger people when they're going through this, their development in adolescence and, beating themselves up and not feeling good enough and all these other things. I always will give them these examples of, hey, look, this is a process. There are people that you would be shocked that don't have their act together. There are people that, really over time only got to the place that you're seeing it look so easy now. And
Yes.
I will also remind them that, you know how much stuff happens behind the scenes that none of us ever see? So when you finally see the people out there, that's why you'll hear like the famous person being interviewed on the Tonight Show, and they'll be like, I'm not an overnight success. I've been doing this for 15 years, only nobody noticed it, and nobody saw the mistakes and the fumbles and the stumbles that I made. So, giving ourselves the gift of process and always having a growth mindset. I hope that I never reach that point where I think I'm perfect and I think that, oh, I'm just so great at everything, because then that means I've stopped growing. I want to continue to always get better and fine tune things and hone my skills. And most of the people that I see that have the biggest problem of getting out of their own way is because they are locked into this idea of perfection, that they have to do something a certain way or have a certain level of mastery, and it derails them every time. If
That's
they
a
can
constant
let
theme,
themselves have a
Patricia.
mind, right.
Yeah, it's always
Growth
like, well,
mindset.
or even the whole, even if it's not public speaking, it's, well, I just need this one more training before I can go out. And you're like, you're ready to go. Let's do it now. Like,
Right.
you don't need one more class. You don't need more, like, at some point you just have to do it. So yes, it does not have to be perfect at first. And I've said it before, I've interviewed hundreds of people. There are people who are best-selling authors who get up and speak in front of people and put people to sleep, yet they
Right.
have hundreds of thousands of followers, or they're a bestseller. There's someone for everyone, right? And just because your delivery or your presentation isn't like someone else doesn't mean you're not also going to attract a group of people that still love what you're saying.
Very good point. Yes.
Before we get into, like, I want to talk more about like confidence and self-esteem, but let's just talk about a couple of public speaking tips and tricks. I wonder if you agree with some of these. At least for me, what I've noticed over time is, since there's a lot of Zoom interviews on video, while it's uncomfortable, I find that staring into the camera is best for the audience, right? Because then you're watching it and it feels like the person is talking directly to you versus looking down at the screen. That's one thing that I do on Zoom videos. But then if I'm speaking publicly in person, and I have to remind me, even after all these years, I still have to remind myself, I'm like, look people in the eye, look at each audience member, like, make eye contact. That's something that I have to, like, remind myself to actually do.
Yes, and it's so interesting how those two things are really opposing each other right now. And I agree with you 100%. I force myself constantly to look into that little dot of my laptop and resist the urge to look down at the person that I'm talking to. And, first of all, obviously eye contact in person is enormous, and we can get to that, but I want to
Yes.
finish the idea about this Zoom. So there's a couple of weird things going on. So first of all, I think that the person that invents the traveling camera on a laptop or whatever device you're on that will always be placed underneath the person that's speaking is going to make $1 billion, because we are desperate for that. We need a traveling camera that will
Yes.
make eye contact with everybody, right? I wish I was technically brilliant and I could invent that myself. But so when I'm working and training people and you want to have that interaction, I do need to glance down every once in a while, because I want to get their facial cues. I want to get their nonverbals and their body language. I want to make sure that I'm getting the information that is derived from those things, because that's enormous, valuable information. But it is so weird in this virtual land that we're living in that, if we aren't looking in that lens, either we don't look like we're making eye contact, and we also don't look like we're listening. Because if we're looking down, watching them, but they're looking, seeing us, people almost feel like you're not listening because they don't see your eyes looking
Mm.
at them. So it's twofold, to look like you're talking to them and you're making eye contact, but also to look like you're listening. So it's just something we have to deal with in this new reality. So it's a little bit of a bounce back for me. But yes, and I will teach clients this: please resist the urge to look at the boxes, especially when you're presenting and you're talking. You should be right directly into that lens. But I do get that we have to retrieve that other nonverbal information. And then in person, when we don't make eye contact with people, it makes it look like we're less calm and confident within our own
Mhm.
skin, because comfortable, confident people look people in the eye. When we don't try to make it a point to reach each of those faces and scan the room and work around the room, then everybody simply just doesn't feel included. It looks like you're just talking to a faceless masks of strangers and that personal touch of really connecting on a one-on-one human level doesn't happen. So yes, the two things that you're doing are exactly what you should be doing, but I agree with you. It's something we always have to remind ourselves of and always work toward, because when those two things are not happening, either on Zoom or in the room, there is a big disconnect.
Let's talk a little bit more about again the body language. Once I had interviewed a body language expert, and she was saying, for example, let's say someone's much taller than you and you're having a meeting, you offer to sit down so that you're both on the same level, like all these different sort of tricks, or standing in front of the room, or even taking up more space at the table with like a pet of paper or things like that, sort of power moves, as one would say.
Yeah.
What are some other tips and tricks or things we need to think about when it comes to body language and confidence, whether that's we're trying to pitch someone to sell, to invest in our company, or whether that's we're giving a speech, or give us some ins and outs of what we might need to kind of, be alerted for?
Sure. So I think that some of the best ways to really connect and build rapport with people and build trust is to be fully present, not only with your listening skills, but with your eye contact and with your body. Is everything pointing in their direction? Are your belly buttons lining up if you had put a string or something in between them? Or you're making that connection? Are your feet pointing towards each other and not toward the door, like psychologically or subconsciously you really want to get the heck out of there? Or maybe they do, and you're kind of noticing and trying to line that up. There's something called mirroring. When we're in sync with each other, we actually almost repeat the mannerisms. Or if you're toasting someone, the same hands will go up, and as if we're in a mirror with each other. You'll see that when people are in rapport, we start syncing up our mannerisms and our body language without even knowing it, just because we're in that flow together. So if you're not in that flow and you want to be in that flow, you can start actually even doing that and lining up with them. You don't want to go too far overboard, like you're miming or that it's getting creepy, but just to like head in that direction of being in that sync. And also very open body language. If you're someone who crosses your leg, cross in the direction of the person that you're talking to or that you're going to be, wanting to make that connection with. So it's really that fully present alignment of I'm open, I'm accessible, I'm on the same page with you, I'm not putting a barrier in between us, I'm not blocking, I'm not hiding my hands behind my back. It's also being relaxed and comfortable in your own skin. Am I holding on for dear life to my pen or the table? Is my foot bouncing like crazy underneath the table? There's one story I tell in my book about a doctor that I worked with when I was anchoring one of these medical satellite programs that I do for this one company I've worked with for many years. We were down in Texas, and this doctor came into the room, and she was all business, man. She was like in this steel gray suit, looking like $1,000,000. She had her, red heeled Louboutins on, and she was like also an ice queen walking into the room, like no one was going to mess with her. And I started to notice when we were going through the table read, I looked under the table and her feet were bouncing a mile a minute. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, she's really putting up a front here. She's nervous as heck right now. And nobody else was noticing it. And she was not a pleasant person to work with. She was just very cold and all business. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a really miserable show. So when we had a break for a minute, I said, let's go take a walk. And we walked to the coffee machine and nobody else was around. And I looked at her and I said, how many times you've been interviewed in front of the camera? And she looks at me, she goes, oh, this is my first time. And I said, well, I just want you to know, like, I'm here to like make you look your best. I'm here to make this be a great show, to make you shine, like the expert you are. And I'm really appreciative of you being here today. And I'm really here to help you, be your best. She looked at me, she almost got choked up and she was like, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. She said, I'm really so nervous and I'm working overtime to put up a good face here. It changed the entire dynamic. We had an amazing show. She opened up. She was like a different person, like the ice had melted. If I didn't know enough to look down at other body language and have had
Mhm.
the training in body language that I did, I would not have been able to make that shift happen. And it made all the difference for her and for our show.
Yeah, and what wonderful support, and also what confidence, right? That's amazing. I also feel, you're also an actress. You had a recurring role, right, on Law and Order.
Yes, well, that might make it sound really better than it was. I was on 4 times playing a role of a Dawn Condor, where I was a TV host and an anchor and a reporter in the 4 different episodes. But it's funny because I've done some acting and some different things, but it's usually not too much of a stretch. I'm
Stretch from
usually
what you do.
hired. Yeah, I'm usually hired to do the thing that I do anyway.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've noticed over time, and maybe you have too, and if you're out there and you're just an enjoyer of movies and TV shows, people don't blink. They don't blink
Mm.
very often. If you're in a dramatic scene, if you really watch these actors, if you're really looking at it, they're not blinking as much as we do in real life. I wonder what you think about that or if you've noticed that.
Interesting. Well, blinking is a really interesting topic because I've actually been hired by people to try to get people to stop excessive blinking because it's a
Yes.
distraction in front of camera. And I'm like, okay,
Yes.
look, it's usually because this is how they're processing information. It's usually because they're nervous and they're trying to get all the ducks in a row in their head. It could be a habit they don't even know they have, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, I'm glad that you brought this up because it brought me back to something I wanted to say earlier about eye contact. So what we also don't want to have happen, there's kind of a nice, comfortable zone of like a 2 to 4 second zone of comfortable eye contact. Anything less than 2 seconds is creepy and eye darting and makes it look like we're, guilty of something or shifty or something. Over above the 4 second, we start to look like a stalker, like we're boring into someone's soul through their brain, through their eyes. And it can be really uncomfortable. It can be very effective if you're trying to hold your ground and if you're trying to
Yes.
really, be firm with somebody and let them know that you mean business. But it's the same thing, I think, in acting. It's like we need to have those eye blinks to kind of have that moment of I'm not just staring, blazing this stare into your soul. And we also kind of need to like look up and look down because that's how we retrieve information. That's how we contemplate. That's how we ponder. That's how we feel emotion. That's how we remember emotion. So if those normal things aren't happening, I think that in the actor world, that can be a telltale sign that you're acting and not really feeling. Because if you were
Mhm.
really feeling and really experiencing all that internal stuff, you're naturally gonna blink. You're naturally going to go inside and have those eyes go up to the left or to the right or down. So it's probably because they're so self-aware and so much trying to act rather than letting it be in the moment and let those feelings try to come naturally. That would be my guess.
Yeah, and I guess I would say that I think I see it mostly when we're talking about scenes that are dramatic and someone is holding court or they are being very forceful, right, in a power kind of role. Then you really see like minimal blinking, which makes
Yeah.
sense, right? It's really
Yes.
holding that vibe. Um, let's talk about confidence and self-esteem in general. Now, we've been talking about in the performance aspect, but let's just talk about it in general because this is something that, like you said in the beginning, and when after I wrote my book, everybody wants more of this, it seems, and you kind of can't get enough of it. And like I've said, and I'm sure you agree too, that we look up to confident people because we sort of trust they're authentic. They say what they mean what they say. We speak up. You have a story on your blog that I'd love you to tell us about how you spoke up to a boss who spoke down to you and patronized you and was really crappy. And you had a moment and then you went into his office and you kind of called him on it. I guess I would say that in those moments of doing that, there is I'm sure you would agree that there's a tone thing. You'd rather be confident going in there versus going in there and being like, hey, you're not gonna like in some bitchy affected tone. It's so much more powerful and the message gets across when you're confident. So can you just tell us about that story and any of them like it where people needed to speak up?
Yes, sure. So I was very, very young. It was one of my first jobs when I was still in college. It was something that I'd gotten through the college that a local book publisher needed someone to do computer work and be an admin. And I remember the guy was just a very gruff, not a very nice man, very bad interpersonal skills, certainly not warm and friendly or a mentor of any sort or encouraging. And I was really there to just do grunt work. And he did a lot of commemorative books for organizations and nonprofits and churches and things like that. And when the time came for collections for some of the monies, he obviously didn't want to do it himself, but he wanted to be a bit of a bulldog about it. So he'd get other people to do it. And I didn't sign up for this. And I started to find myself in a situation where he was asking me to make collection calls. And this was horrifying to me because we were talking about nonprofits and, religious facilities and places that, yes, of course, they should be able to pay their bills when they're getting all of these publications or these commemorative books made up. But frankly, a lot of them were struggling and needed donations. So I was really torn to have to be thrown into this situation. And I remember he lost patience with me because I wasn't good at it. And I was really young and still finding my voice and my confidence to begin with. So excruciating trying to call up some of these places. And one day when I was at my worst trying to work my way through this, he lost patience and just blew up on me and screamed at me and belittled me. And I literally like walked away and then ended up running toward the bathroom and just locked myself in there for a little while and just lost my crap because I felt like I was, 2 inches tall, and it was awful. And then as I let it all out, and once I finally had that relief, then I suddenly was sitting there and I was just like, that was so wrong of him. Like that was just, I can't believe that this man just did this to me in a work related role. This wasn't even a friend or a family member or somebody that may for some reason feel that it's okay to do that to somebody that they know that they have a close relationship with, which isn't okay either. But I got to this point at even a really young age without a lot of confidence. I walked back out of there, got myself together, and I sat down at my desk and I thought, you know what? This just this isn't it's not right. How dare he do this to me? And suddenly this anger started brewing, but because I was still very shy and soft spoken, that kind of benefited me because I didn't walk in there yelling and screaming and losing my shit. I was like, you know what? I just walked in there and I just collected my thoughts, and I don't know where the till this day I don't know where that confidence and that courage came from. I think it came from just knowing how wrong it was. And I went in there and I just said, I don't even remember the words. I recounted it in the book, but I was like on the blog, I was like, it was wrong. What you did was wrong. And I just stared at him because I literally didn't have better words. I didn't know how to really fully have the confidence to say what was on my mind and have my voice. And I think I just held my ground because of that by default, which ended up working beautifully because I
Yes, right. It's
talked
like a
myself
default
out of it,
freeze. Yeah.
right? And he just looked at me and his whole demeanor changed. And he was like, you know what? I'm sorry. You're right. And it completely changed the relationship from that day on.
And what I love about that is it's a classic case of when you call a bully on their shit, usually it puts them in their place and they're so stunned that they
Right.
do relent and just go, "Oh my God, I'm sorry."
Right. And he could have thought that I was holding my ground. He could have thought that it was by design, that it was showing strength that I just stood there staring at him. He didn't
Right.
need to know that it was because I was just like dumbfounded on my own self of how I even ended up in his office, but it ended up working beautifully.
Well, and so short and sweet, right? Hey, that was wrong. And then just standing and staring. Like, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. I'm sure
That's
I
just
said a
such
little bit of something
right.
about it, but I don't remember the exact words, but it was definitely short and sweet because it was all I was capable of in the moment.
Yes. Then the other aspect of confidence too, where there's so many people out there that feel really confident in their ability in something, maybe their knowledge in something, but they don't have the confidence to speak up or go out there or put it up. And a lot of it is always, again, back to what other people will think of them. Right. So you have to at some point, right? In
Yes.
in our professions, you have to get to a point where you don't really care. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
you're okay with whatever. But that's a tough stumbling block. What do you say to people that are like, well, what will people think of me? Or,
Yeah.
well, I don't know if I can declare myself as this. I mean, who do I think I am? I'm new at this, or
Right.
I'm not like everyone else where they may be far along in that same profession. So what right do I have? All of those inner
Yes.
thoughts.
Yeah, and all of those things I've heard from clients and students over the years. And, one thing I can tell you is that everybody's journey is very different, and we are all carrying around baggage from our past. And a recurring theme that comes up a lot is, how people were made to feel growing up and throughout their lives, even by those people that love them. I have two current clients that basically were made to feel less than by a parent or a family member. They weren't asked to have a voice at the table. They were always told that they kind of didn't know what they were talking about, or belittled in some way, or they didn't feel valued in some way. And this can be something that happened 20, 30 years ago. And when we find ourselves going out of our comfort zone and putting ourselves out there, these little things can rear their ugly head like you wouldn't believe. And this luggage and these stories and these things that people have told us over the years, and some of them we may not even really remember. It could have been a teacher, it could have been a coach, it could have been an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend or partner. It could have been somebody that made us not feel good about ourselves, or that we were good enough in some respect. And we don't even know that that's floating around like space junk up in our mind. And it's the thing that is making us feel like we don't deserve it now, or that we haven't earned that now. I mean, certainly as you mature and you get wisdom, and you hopefully, that's one of the blessings that come with age, that you tend to start to worry less about what other people think. And that's, though, if you had a normal support system. And I don't even know if that exists. I don't know what the word normal means, but certainly if you had people that you thought were in your corner, that didn't make you feel great about yourself, it's a big problem. I had consulted with one of my friends who is a psychologist about one of my clients. She was from Asia, and she was at some big international event when she was a child, maybe a teen, representing a lot of people, competing to some degree. I won't give away too much of this, because again, it's private information. But she was laughed at, she was ostracized, she was made to feel bad by her community and her family, all because she had a bad experience on stage. I'll leave it at that. Probably 20 something years later, I meet her in this country, and she has an opportunity to be in front of the camera and be in the spotlight again. And guess what shows up? All of this stuff. And
Yeah.
she knows she's a mature woman. She knows she's achieved things. She knows she's had success, and she's a big girl now. But physically and emotionally, this was wrecking her. So I consulted with this one psychologist who's been a mentor of mine for many, many years. And he said, you literally need to go through a session with her to where she goes through her mind, finds this little girl in the back of her mind, and literally says goodbye to her. Literally says to her, I'm no longer you. I'm this, this, and this now, and takes an inventory of who she is now as a strong woman, and literally tells this child in her mind that it's time to go bye-bye, go away. I'm not you anymore.
That's great.
And she really benefited. It was shocking, because I kind of, understood how to direct her through this by the tools that he had given me. And then it was something that she could do on her own in the privacy of wherever she was. And she did it many, many times over and over. And it was an unbelievable release for her.
Yeah, it's like a cord cutting ceremony with yourself, with your old
Right.
self. Yeah, let's get into some of these 180 success stories. So interesting. Tell us about people who went from, phases of to confidence.
Yeah. So I had another person that had come up from a southern state. I used to, when we could get together, which hopefully we'll be there again, I used to do these TV host connection weekends where it would be a full day Saturday and Sunday. And I'd have people come in from all over the country, all over different places. And we would do coaching and training all day Saturday. They'd come up with like their dream show idea. We'd work with them in front of the camera to find their footing, collect their thoughts, whether it was bullet points or teleprompter, or fine tuning their content and their performance and their hosting skills and their likability and all those other things. And we'd work. And then on Sunday, they'd come in and have this all fine tuned. And then I'd have literally a panel of agents and casting directors and some producers and people like that, almost a la American Idol for hosts, right? And they would come in the afternoon and they'd do a big Q&A. And then I'm losing my voice for some reason. Let me just take a drink. And then they would do their stand-up in front of the panel and get instant feedback about their show concept idea, their hosting skills, where these people felt like they would make a good, strong host, what they might want to target, career advice, all these other things. So I have this one girl that came up and she worked in these animal shelters, and she had this beautiful concept about getting older dogs adopted, because unfortunately those are the ones that tend to be euthanized before the puppies do. And she wanted to do a show or a segment on how to highlight and profile these animals so that they would get a good home and not be put to death, unfortunately. And she was just this lovely soul of a wonderful person who was a bit of an introvert, not showbiz type as far as, I'm going to be a great, performer, presenter here, but had a really great heart and a great purpose and passion. And probably at one point before they were all supposed to get up, she just goes running out of the room, just gone. And I'm like, okay, where is she? So we take a little break for a minute, or I put things on pause, whatever it was, I go find her. She is basically almost curled up in a corner, crying, can't do this. I can't do this. I can't go in front of the group. I can't blah, 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 blah. So I had to talk her off the roof for a little bit and just kind of understand where she was coming from and what was it. And then finally, we just had this discussion, and I was like, are you here to like become some famous celebrity or from some famous TV star? Like, what are you really here for? And she's like, I just want to save these animals. I don't want these so many animals being put down. Like, and I said, okay, so then let's agree that this is not about you, right? You're an advocate here for beings that can't speak for themselves. This is why you're here. So what I'd like you to do is when you go back into the room, forget the panels there, because they were looking directly in the camera and the panel was watching on the monitors. I said, really pretend you're live on television and you're talking to a person or people. I always usually say have a one-on-one conversation, but you're talking to someone that you're going to convince with your whole heart, mind, body, and spirit that they need to save these animals. And just go with that. Just only focus on that. This girl came back in that room and she friggin' knocked it out of the park.
I love
People
that.
were getting filled up. The agents and cast directors were getting emotional. She had them like at hello. Everybody stood up and gave her a standing ovation at the when she was done. And she almost collapsed afterwards. It was one of those moments like, oh my God, I can't believe I just did that. But she got out of her own way. She stopped thinking about being liked, speaking right, do all these things. That's me, me, me. This is what we get so overly hyper self-focused when we are putting ourselves out there. You've got to focus on like what I guess it's Simon Sinek that says, what's your why? So once she tapped into being an advocate and speaking for somebody else that couldn't, in this case, animals, it was like the magic bullet for her.
I love that. And that's also such a great piece of advice as well. Most people who are out there who want to speak publicly or to talk or do videos on whatever topic, you have done that to a friend. You've expressed that exact sentiment to a friend or someone you met on a bus who asked you about it. It's no different. It's just that suddenly there's 50,000 people in the room and you lose that, but you've got to always get back to that. Hey, I'm talking to one person. I'm telling my mom about this or whatever it is that makes it. And so I'm not surprised that she was impassioned and that worked out.
Right. And it's fine, finding how do you get out of your way is by finding how can I give value? How can I be of service? How can I maybe put a teacher's hat on in front of that room or in front of that camera? And if you can't do those things, you need to say why. What is it about the content or about the situation that is making me not feel like I can give value or not feel like I can be of service or not feel like I can teach here? And then why are you there? So you've got to then dig a little bit deeper and find the things that you will believe or that will help you earn the right to know that, yes, you are giving value here. You can be of service to that audience in some way. You can teach them or help them, whether it's entertaining them, inspiring them, educating them, whatever it might be. You have to find that thing. Otherwise, you're just out there like a mouthpiece and a body giving energy that's not benefiting anybody. We're getting pulled in so many different directions. Like, our time is precious. We need to know that there's a reason that we're going to give you our eyes and ears right now and walk out of there either feeling inspired or feeling better about ourselves or chuckling or maybe learning something we didn't know. And if you aren't sure of that, you've got to find that in the content or in your purpose before you get into that situation.
That's great. I'm thinking about sounds sort of random, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this. So I'm sure people in the audience and you have, we've all probably tuned in at some point or caught a bit of like QVC or Home Shopping Network, right?
Mhm.
I'm always amazed by these people because I tune in sometimes just because I find it to be almost comedic, because their job when they go in and they're auditioning for the role on QVC as a host is like they're given a big pen and they're like, here, sell it. You have to talk for like an hour about a pen, right? So,
Yes.
or a chair, right? It doesn't matter. You have to continually talk. And what I think is really great about that is if you are in a situation where you want to be a host or something where there might be improvisation around, go watch some QVC for a while. Watch these people pull
Yes.
everything that they can out of this damn, like foldable chair. It's
Right.
unbelievable. They'll go into I laugh. It's almost like a comedy to me sometimes, and that's why I tune into it, because I'm amazed. And I think it's a great example too, if someone wants to be, in a scenario where they really need to like be on their feet, aside from taking an improv class, of course, which I would recommend. But I find watching them is quite fascinating, and I think you can learn a lot.
It's a master class in improvisation,
Yes.
in the gift of gab, in the gift of blarney, as anybody
Right.
would call it. And it's so true. And I have had the luxury of coaching some of the hosts that are actually on there right now and
There you
coaching
go.
some of the guest experts. I have been a guest expert on both QVC and HSN in the States and in London and Ireland over 70 times in my past. So I get it. And it was really hard in the beginning. But now you could literally hand me any inanimate object and
Right.
I could talk to you for 2 hours about it, no problem.
It's a
And the
great skill.
key, the key though is again, things don't get on air there unless they can make someone's life easier, make them more beautiful, make them money. It's benefit, feature, benefit, feature, benefit, benefit, benefit. And it's who, what, where, when, not why, and how. So, and I've taught this to people, whether it is in any kind of on-camera ability or public speaking ability, or if it's someone who is someone that's going to be interviewing people like a reporter or a host. If you can cover who, what, where, when, why, and how, you can talk for hours. Who does this benefit? Why? How? In what situations? All of that. You just keep going through that list of those things. And as long as you are thinking about examples for the other person, and then you can weave in some of your own stories of how something helped you or made your life easier or whatever, you can literally go on forever as long as you're flexible, you're calm, you're relaxed, you use that whole, what's that one rule of improv?
Yes, and
Yes, and that's it. Thank you. So you just keep making it work. You just keep chewing the fat. But I find that who, when, where, why, and how is a beautiful list of things that you can expand and expand and expand on.
I love it. In closing up here in the next few minutes, let's talk more about confidence. It's really for everybody, not just for people who want to speak up. This is a great journey of just really discovering that, like you say, that quiet inner thread of self reliance and self knowledge that holds you together when the outside is in a whirl. So, tell us a little bit more about confidence and what the reader and what you offer us here in this book.
Yes. So when I first started writing the book, I did think I was going to be writing a media training or public speaking book. And then as it evolved over the years, because I couldn't write it full time because of, obviously we're all juggling so many things, it dawned on me that it was what I said earlier was that was what everyone was seeking, was calm and confidence, that combination together. And that isn't that really what we all need in our everyday lives, whatever we're doing, because we all have to speak and advocate for ourselves and watch what stories we're saying to ourselves internally before we can communicate and have our interpersonal skills. And whether you're raising your hand at a meeting at a school, or going on a job interview, or dealing with a contractor over the phone that's not being very nice, I mean, it just applied to everyone. So I wanted to create an overview, a hybrid of personal and professional development. And there's 4 pillars to the book. The first is everyday confidence, where it's how to find that calm and how to find that confidence in identifying what are your confidence and calm killers. What are those things that boost your calm and your confidence? And then what are self-care things that either derail our calm and confidence or build those things up? And then the second pillar is the resilient confidence, whether it's handling setbacks, how to find courage, and what are some of those tools that we can use. I outline a lot of different tools to find that calm and that confidence in all different situations, and are getting our self-image and how that kind of relates to how we put ourselves out there and achieve our goals. And then the third third pillar is communication confidence, where I go through, the inner voice, the outer voice, all the body language we talked about, the nonverbals, public speaking and interview skills, and all those things for those times. So it's really designed as a book that you can flip through. You don't have to read it straight through, and because the final pillars are the natural confidence, foods and remedies and exercises and mindset things that we can do. But everything is outlined on how it affects both your calm and then also your confidence. And I will add that so much of it is that constant battle between our inner critic and our inner coach. It's like that traditional
Mhm.
angel devil of who am I going to listen to on either shoulder. And every single person, I don't care how famous, rich, successful, well-known CEO, you name it, everybody's got that inner critic. It is not going away, but some people really work very hard at getting better at being their own inside coach and drowning out that voice that's talking to you and you talking to yourself as the way that you would coach someone through finding their calm and confidence. And the more we do that, because you can't do them both simultaneously, the more that we focus on ways to be that better inside coach to find our calm and confidence, the less that inner critic shows up and derails us.
So well said. Absolutely. And I do it myself, and I'm sure you do too. There's moments you're about to speak and you're like, "Ooh, I know my heart rate. Uh-oh." And then you just have to really you have to really self-talk and kind of
You
coach
really do.
yourself.
You do.
Um,
You have to control your breathing. You have to say, what am I visualizing? And am I visualizing everything going wrong, or am I visualizing everything going right? And what's the price that I'm putting on this? And it really is that kind of self-talk, and still happens till this day. I don't walk around perfectly calm and confident all the time. I mean, with all the stuff that's been going on in our world and so many bumps and misdirects and changes, and there's a lot. Like we are all in this together. We are all working through discouragement, fear, change, uncertainty. This is a constant process, which goes back to that growth process that I was saying about earlier, is that we all have to continue to grow. We have to continue to work at mastering our own doubts and fears and realizing what we can control and what we can't control. But certainly it's in that moment of, okay, let me get control of my physical self. Let me get control of what I'm visualizing. And is it benefiting me or hurting me because I'm visualizing worst case scenario here? Or am I going to say, no, what's my plan? What's the plan I made? And how high of a price am I putting on this right now? Because right now, this might feel really scary and might feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to blow it. Okay, let me put this in perspective. Would I rather be here right now or at the deathbed of a loved one? And I hate using that because it's such a jarring analogy, but it's really true. If you are panicking or having that fight or flight feeling about a difficult conversation or about being in front of the camera or public speaking or anything where you feel naked or feeling out of your comfort zone, I'll always say to myself, you know what? It's a heck of a lot better than if I would be over here right now losing somebody I care about.
okay, I love this that you just said that. I haven't heard that, and I think it's great because it really is. Uh, it's back to sort of like my original, my first book on paleo primal nutrition. It's that ancestral fight or flight. There is a threat, but it's not really a threat. And what you're doing there is you're kind of reasoning with yourself. You're going, hold on a minute. Is this really like a worst case shitty scenario situation? Like I could be at like it puts the current situation way in perspective. It's the same as no one wants to hear when they're crying about like let's say they lost their job and someone being like, well, at least you have your legs. I mean, but
Right.
sometimes we have to go there to get ourselves out of this
Right.
fight or flight that was triggered. That's not really a threat.
Exactly. Exactly. And sometimes you have to play those games with yourself to get it
Yeah.
to be, I'll tell you one quick thing because I know we're almost out of time, but recently, over the last couple of months, I had been a little rusty, and I was going to be doing one of these medical satellite shows that I often do for this one company I've worked with for many years. They know me, I know them. We're all good with knowing each other, knows what they're doing, and we do our jobs well. And I just had been sick. I hadn't been in front of the camera for a little while. And now had all this medical terminology that I literally was learning on the spot on that day, because as a moderator, you don't want to look like the hired help. And I'm interviewing all these doctors, and people were coming over these big screens. I had 1 or 2 people in the room, but we were in this huge studio because we're all socially distanced, and some people are remote, some people are here. And it was just this big lights, camera, action, huge, big cameras, big set, big studio, and everything just got really big and overwhelming for me. And I started to have the fight or flight and the heart racing, and we were about to go live. And all of a sudden, I don't know why, somebody had said something to me when I got outside of the room or whatever it was, but lo and behold, the perspective came when I needed it. And I said, you know what? Stop it. What you're going to do right now is you're going to picture that most people right now are stuck at home, and they're either watching you on a teeny tiny phone or in a teeny tiny box on their laptop, because this is how people are receiving this right now. You're not on the Today Show. You're not on these big screen TVs at home. I had to physically, and I don't even know what was true here. I just,
That's right.
story,
Yeah.
This was the story I had to tell myself. I said, I'm going to now come from the perspective that I'm just on a Zoom or FaceTime with these people, and all of that fight or flight dissipated. Because I had to minimize it. I had to put a lesser price on it. I had to make it work for myself in that moment. And it helped me and it saved me.
I love that. This has been so wonderful. I hope to speak with you again in the future. And everybody, go get Patricia's book, Calmfidence, and please visit her website, patriciastark.com. I'll put everything in the show notes to connect with her. Thank you so much. Is there any last words you'd like to leave with our audience? Although
Well,
that
thank
last bit's
you.
great.
I just want to tell you what a pleasure. You've been a wonderful interviewer. You made it easy for me. I enjoyed our conversation. It was just so easy and organic and flowing. I appreciate you so much. And I'm grateful to be here. And I have a lot of gratitude that you invited me here. So thank you so much for that. And I guess just the final things that I would like to say is that, you know, when you do these big group trainings, when you write a book, when you've worked with large entities, a lot of people also don't realize that you do one-on-one training. And I want people to know that I am accessible. I am reachable. I do work over phone. I do work over Zoom. I have clients that are, you know, large, again, entities and big groups. And I have just one-on-one people that just need help with their calm and confidence and their communication skills. So if you reach out to me, you will get me.
Love it. Yes, please seek her out. Thank you so much. And for everyone else, we'll see you next time.
Hey listeners, you know, over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/Elle Russ for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products. And I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.